The Hay Bale Haunter. I had never been one to believe in ghosts or the supernatural, but what happened that summer at my grandparents' farm changed everything. I remember it vividly. It was late July, and the air was thick with humidity. My grandparents had asked me to stay and help out with the chores while they visited my aunt, who had just had surgery. The farm was quiet, nestled away from the bustling town, and surrounded by endless fields of corn. One evening, just as the sun began to set, I decided to check on the old barn. It had always creeped me out a little. My grandpa told stories about how it was built over 100 years ago and how it had seen its share of bad times. Livestock dying mysteriously, tools going missing, strange noises. Typical rural legends, I thought. As I approached, the barn loomed in the twilight, its weathered wood and sagging roof casting eerie shadows. I pushed open the creaky door and stepped inside. The smell of hay and aged wood filled my nostrils. Dust motes floated lazily in the dying light, filtering through the gaps in the walls. I took a few steps in and froze. There was a chill in the air that hadn't been there before, a cold that seemed out of place on such a warm evening. I shook off the feeling and began checking the stalls. Everything seemed normal at first, just the usual clutter of old farming equipment and bales of hay. Then I heard it, a soft rustling, like the sound of dry hay shifting. My heart pounded as I turned around, scanning the barn for the source. Nothing. The rustling grew louder, more insistent. It seemed to come from the hay bales stacked in the corner. I told myself it was just a mouse or some other small animal, but my legs moved forward against my better judgment. As I approached the bales, the rustling became clear movement. The hay bales seemed to shift and sway, forming vague, human-like shapes. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. My flashlight flickered and I fumbled with it, casting erratic beams of light around the barn. In one brief flash, I saw them. The bales had taken on a sinister form, resembling twisted, contorted figures. Panic surged through me. I stumbled backward, tripping over a pitchfork, and landed hard on the floor. The flashlight rolled away, its beam settling on the hay bales, which now seemed to be inching toward me. With shaking hands, I grabbed the flashlight and directed its beam straight at the moving hay. The figures halted and a whisper filled the air. "Leave this place," it hissed. "You do not belong here." I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline fueling my escape. I bolted out of the barn, slamming the door behind me. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat on the porch, staring at the barn, wondering what I had disturbed. The next day, I boarded up the barn, vowing never to enter it again. My grandparents returned and I told them everything. They listened, their faces pale. My grandpa nodded knowingly and said, "That barn has always had its secrets. Maybe now they're finally awake." To this day, I avoid that part of the farm. I never learned what spirit controlled those hay bales, but I can still hear its rustling whispers in my nightmares, urging me to leave, warning me of the Hay Bale Haunter.